If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy. Download and subscribe at BeBullish.com. The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Live from the Powerhouse Blowtorch, Talk Radio 77 WABC, and broadcasting from the center of the universe, New York City. Welcome to another edition of the Dr. Sky Experience, as we like to call it, Theater of the Mind, with great topics and great content from the realms of astronomy, space, aviation, and weather, celebrity guests, and a mixture of American exceptionalism. As we continue, ladies and gentlemen, to talk about our very special guest for the 2 hours, the contact number to get in touch with us here at our Ground Zero location is 1-800-848-9222, 1-800-848-9222. As we come on the air now with information regarding this weekend's impending blizzard-like conditions for many in the Northeast states, the definition meteorologically of a blizzard goes like this. A snowstorm defined as having winds of a minimum 35 miles an hour or more, with a near zero visibility lasting at least 3 hours. But going back into the archive of the historical site of blizzards, did you know that the most extensive blizzard, the most powerful one, at least in modern times, was back on February 3, 1972 in Iran? The blizzard, with snows reaching 26 feet in height, but closer to home and more important to all of us here in the United States, if we call it that, the Great Blizzard of 1888. Where in the New York metro area, well over 200 individuals perished, with winds, of course, and snows of 58 inches. Our story, as we continue with the Dr. Sky Experience, also refers to a blizzard in 1964, relating that story to the world of aviation, when a B-52 with 2 hydrogen bombs hit severe turbulence in a winter nor'easter, forcing the B-52 to crash, the crew ejected, and this particular story continues, ladies and gentlemen, with 2 hydrogen bombs being released, B-53 nuclear warheads, each capable of 9 megatons of force. A potential catastrophe, that is, for America, and it also happened many times, but once again in 1961. Here is the story of bravery, luck, and people working together. But not to alarm everybody, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, the Doomsday Clock, now moves it forward to 85 seconds to midnight. It was some 7 minutes to midnight back in 1947, and then moved to 17 minutes to midnight in 1991. The question that we may ask our listeners out there is, how secure is America's nuclear arsenal? But more important to that, a story of bravery, luck, and people working together. Our very special guest for this hour is award-winning writer Linda Harris Sitting, a former adjunct professor at Shenandoah University. She, of course, the author of many books, A Cut from the Strong Cloth, The Last Curtain Call, Counting Crows, Opening Closed Doors. And this book, ladies and gentlemen, really important to learn about history, the B-52 down, the night the bombs fell from the sky. With that, good morning, Linda, and thank you for being up with us on the Dr. Sky Experience. How are you this morning?
I'm great, Steve, and thank you for having me on the show.
Hi, I'm really a big pleasure, ladies and gentlemen. This is an interesting topic to talk about. And in hour number 2, we'll continue with our aviation expert, Bill Yenny, talking more about the whole security or insecurity in the past and maybe the present of the whole story of nuclear weapons. From the humanistic side, take us down the path, because I find this book very interesting, Linda. First of all, your compulsion to write this book. Tell us more about the background of writing the book.
So I was at a book talk in Cumberland, Maryland, on my 3rd book, Counting Crows, about the 1918 flu epidemic in New York City. And, actually it was the 2nd book, Last Curtain Call, which is the 1894 coal mining strike in all along the eastern seaboard. And a gentleman came up out of the audience and had me sign his book. And then he said, hey, I know this great story about a 5-man crew in 1964 whose plane crashed near Cumberland, Maryland with 2 nuclear bombs on board. And I kind of smiled, and he said, you'd be the perfect person to make this into a book. And I said, well, I don't really write military. I'm known for writing stories about strong women. And he said to me, well, each of those guys, had a wife, and those wives had to be strong women for what their husbands were going to go through. And I said, well, I'm under contract to finish a third book right now. As soon as it's done, I'll think about it. And he said, well, let's trade emails. I said, okay, so we did. Every month, without fail, I'd get an email from Bucky Schreiber, and he'd say, how you doing with that last book? Are you ready yet to write the story of the B-52? And then COVID hit. And so it was July of 2020, and he called me and he said, look, there are two women driving up here all the way from Alabama because their uncle, Robert Townley, was one of the part of the crew, and they want to visit his memorial. And I think if you met with them, you'd find it really interesting. So I said, all right, my husband and I said, we'd agree. So we drove up to actually LaVale, Maryland. We met them in a hotel lobby. Yes. We were all wearing masks for COVID. And they sat there, Steve, and for the next 3 hours, they told me not just everything about the crash, but how it had impacted the 5 families whose husbands, had been crew members. And then the most amazing thing was 1,000 volunteers. And this is up in Garrett County, Maryland, which is it's the most rural county in Maryland. A group of 1,000 volunteers came from all over, military, local, to try and look for survivors. And once they had finished talking with me for about 3 hours, Jim and I, my husband and I, got back in the car, and I turned to him and I said, I have to write the story. That's
amazing, Linda. It really is.
Yeah.
And it's a story everybody should read, not only if you're an aviation fan, but as we talk about this, not to alarm people, many people may not know. We talk about great mysteries on this radio show. Dateline now, January 13th, 1964, a B-52, the 484th bomb wing, identified as Buzz 14. Now, relating that to what people may be experiencing this weekend with a potential blizzard in the whole northeastern area of the United States, it has a lot to do with the story you're going to tell us about. This B-52 was coming back from Massachusetts on board, not to steal your thunder, 2 thermonuclear warheads. B-53 is described as the potential of 9 megatons of explosive force. Now, I don't want to get into the physics of it right now, but if people look at the Hiroshima bombing and also Nagasaki, they may have dialed it up. But we're allegedly talking about 15 kilotons in those explosions, and I know you know that. The listeners may not. But can you imagine, though, if all else, and we haven't even gotten into the story, if those 2 bombs had detonated on the ground, we would not be talking today. And many people have no clue that this whole story, and there's others like it. So talk about it from the humanistic side. These pilots, they're flying. What happens to their aircraft? Where were they? And then describe what happens there with the aircraft and then their descent.
All right, so let's start actually on Sunday, the day before. They're stationed at Turner Air Force Base down in Albany, Georgia. It is 55 degrees in Georgia, and they get called back on base and told that they need to go up to Massachusetts, pick up this B-52 that needs repairs, and simply fly it back down to Georgia. And so the 5 men, we have Tom McCormick, Major Tom McCormick. He's going to be the pilot. He's 44 years old, grew up in West Virginia. We have the co-pilot, Captain Mac Peden. He's 29 years old. He grew up in Selma, North Carolina. Yes. We have the radio navigator, Major Robert Townley. He's 42 from Alabama. We have the bombardier, Major Bob Payne. He's 41 from Oklahoma. And then the tail gunner, Tech Sergeant Melvin Wooten, who's only 27 years old. So all 5 of the guys have to come. They have the day off, but they've been called back to duty, so they assemble. They get on a plane to take them up to Massachusetts, and once they're up there, it's colder, obviously, and they take a nap, they have something to eat, and then they're ready to go at 12:30 a.m. To come back to Georgia, and it's only supposed to be about a 2.5-hour flight. What happens, and you have to remember that this is 1964, so we don't have the technical expertise determining weather like we do today. Mm-hmm. So they take off 12:30 a.m. Everything, according to schedule, everything's fine. And then at 1:35, they are over Phillipsburg, Pennsylvania, and they all of a sudden encounter some violent turbulence that they really had not expected. And so they radio for permission to drop down to 29,000 feet, but the turbulence only increases. And then they ask for radio permission to climb up to 33,000 feet, and that doesn't help either. And then suddenly what happens is the turbulence is actually an Arctic blizzard. And when the blizzard hits the plane, now Buzz 14 is traveling at 500 miles an hour. When the blizzard hits the plane, the wind shears are 167 miles an hour.
That's
and
incredible.
They hit they hit the plane and they shear off the back tail. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about B-52 bombers for people who are listening in and may not realize. In 1964, the B-52 bomber was the largest American military airplane that had ever been built. So imagine yourself on a football field. If you took a B-52 and you placed it on a football field, the nose and the tail would go from sideline to sideline, and the massive wing spread would go from the goalpost to the 50-yard line. So it is a huge, huge airplane.
Exactly, and since 1952, if people can look into the history of this aircraft, still today, isn't that interesting, Linda, that many of the retirees who flew those in, the earlier times of American aviation, many of their grandchildren are flying the new iterations of B-52s. But just to jump in here, just to let people know, and if they're not old enough to know this, there were 12 B-52s on alert all the time in a project called Chrome Dome. And what were they? Right. They were flying missions up toward Canada, way up to the pole, in the event of a Dr. Strangelove type scenario, where those bombers were in the air with these big hydrogen bombs, and their secret war orders, EWOs, would be to do what? If there was indeed an attack on America. But that's interesting because the whole thing was stopped. It started in 47 and it ended in 91. But please continue. The airplane is disintegrating. It's over Maryland. And what happens next? This is the sad part of the story.
Yeah, this is the sad part. So, of course, the men are, completely thrown. They have no idea about what's going on. They realize that this is not a normal story. And then when the tail is sheared off, the plane actually flips upside down. The military term is -G, so they're actually flying upside down. Mm-hmm. What's really interesting, I think, about this airplane, as huge as it was, there were only 3 bolts that held the tail to the fuselage, to the plane.
Right,
and when
the
wind
vertical
shears,
stabilizer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So when the wind shear of 167 miles an hour hit, they just sheared the tail right off. It also took the back wing. So at this point, McCormick, who's the pilot, realizes they have to bail out. Now, they're at 30,000 feet. And he says, bail out, bail out. The sad part about all of this is, a lot of it's sad, but one of the sadder parts is Major Robert Townley at this exact moment had to go to the bathroom. And so he's at the urinal, not in his seat when the ejection order comes out. So now he's scrambling to get back into his seat so he can get his safety harness on. What happens to the airplane is that they bail out. The men bail out at 30,000 feet into a blizzard, which is sub-zero weather. Now, remember, they came from Georgia wearing 55 balmy degree flight jackets. So some of them
What a shock, eh? What a shock to the system.
Some of them have warmer clothes, and some of them absolutely do not. When the men bail out, the first one out, now they're flying upside down, is Melvin Wooten. And as the ejection happens and the hatch opens and he goes up, there's a huge piece of metal that catches him and breaks his thigh bone as he ejects out into the blizzard. And then one by one, the men pull their ejection pins and they fly out into the blizzard as well, and the plane goes on without them. So what happens, let's talk about the men first. So the men eventually do come to Earth, but not near anybody, not near each other. They land in the Savage River State Forest. It's 52,000 acres of the most rugged terrain in Maryland. In fact, its nickname is the Maryland Alps.
A heck of a lot of snow on the ground, right?
Olympic skiers go there often to practice and stuff. So when they land, they have emergency kits. They, of course, have their parachute, and that's about it. And so one by one they land, but they're nowhere near each other. The blizzard, however, already has 3 to 4 feet of snow on the ground and is still continuing. And so once they land, their decision is, what do I do next? And, how do I survive?
Exactly.
Meanwhile, the plane keeps going, and the plane crashes in a farmer's field near Lonaconing, Maryland. The people who lived through this said that when the plane crashed, the sky lit up blood red, and almost all the residents, everyone woke up because the crash was so enormous, believed it was the end of the world.
Right, and not knowing that it could have been the end of the world with 2 thermonuclear weapons strewn out.
Right, exactly.
And they had no idea. They could have looked like gas cans, but these things could have just taken out states and changed the course of American history in a heartbeat.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the first couple that wakes up and sees the sky and everything, they call the Maryland State Police to alert them, and then from there it goes through a lot of military channels. Of course, the Pentagon everybody is called within military channels to start sending out crews right away to see if they're survivors. And of course, the other big concern is that the nuclear bombs that were on the plane. Now the plane has crashed into a field with 2 nuclear bombs still in it. So. And then locals start, one by one, getting dressed up in the blizzard to try and go see if they can help, if they're survivors and stuff. I read about 2, kind of the neat thing, I should back up just for a minute. When I met Bucky Shriver and I started doing the research, I found there were so many inconsistencies. One newspaper would report one thing, another newspaper would report something totally contradictory. And so I called Bucky and I said, if I'm going to do this, I need to talk to people who actually lived through this. And Bucky said, well, you're up in the mountain country up here. And he said, you're not going to have access to those people unless you go through me. And I said, that's fine. So literally every week, I'd meet Bucky up there in Garrett County, and he would arrange for interviews for people who had been on the rescue teams, which without them, the story just, never would have come forward.
Well, if you're just joining us, ladies and gentlemen, the Dr. Sky Experience, we're speaking with Linda Harris Sitting. She's an author of many books, but the one that's appropriate to our discussion about aviation, thermonuclear weapons, entitled B-52 Down, the Night the Bombs Fell from the Sky. This, an amazing story of B-52, the 484th Bomb Wing, its identification as Buzz-14. And ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions or comments about this particular story, a wide variety of topics here, who knows, maybe somebody listening out there, right, Linda, may have even experienced this thing themselves and they'd like to join in or add to it. The contact number is always 1-800-848-9222. 1-800-848-9222. It's amazing, your writing skill, and I found something even really, really cool about this. And again, not standing on a soapbox, but kudos to radio broadcasters. In this particular case, you identify Hazel Klotz of a radio station called WFRB, a tiny little station down there. She did nothing about military, but what she was doing, right? Explain this to us, Linda. She gave updates on the crash and actually helped the recovery. And it's a radio show that she did was not on military. It was what? What was her kind of theme of her show?
Her program was At Home with Hazel, and it was directed towards women with recipes, housekeeping tips.
How beautiful.
Yeah. This was really kind of amazing because when this whole thing happened, Hazel called into the radio station and said, look, I've got everything set up here in my house to broadcast from. Why don't I do an update to the community? So it wasn't anything, like military, but she would broadcast if, we're hoping that somebody can, come out and help us with this. And I think one of the things that struck me, two things that struck me the most. One was she broadcasted right there the first day. And she said, listen, folks, this is Hazel. Keep your porch lights on because there's a B-52 down out there. 5 men are struggling to survive, and your light could become a beacon. And that's how I got the title to the book, B-52 Down. By the second day, so the crash happens on a Monday. By Tuesday, these 1,000 people have literally come from all over Western Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania to try and help out in this tiny little town of Grantsville, which at the time had, I don't know, maybe 500, maybe a little bit less than 500 population, and now you have an additional 1,000 people. So the thing that everybody needed to do right away was try and figure out where can we put these 1,000 people to sleep and how we're going to feed them. And so Hazel was the one that came forward with the idea. She called all of the local churches, the women's groups of the local churches, and she asked for volunteers to come to Grantsville and cook dinners for the 1,000 volunteers.
That's
each
amazing
day. It is. And I'm not talking hot dogs and baked beans. It was stuffed pork chops. It was ham.
Down home cooking. You know, there you go. Real
it
meals.
Was apple pie.
Comfort food is what I called it, right, Linda?
Yeah,
Comfort food.
Absolutely. And they fed them in shifts.
Well, here's the deal, Linda. As I say, this is a story of bravery, luck, and people working together in what could have been, if things changed, and we want to be positive here, the local community, and I think your story goes into, not to take your thunder on this, but apparently people were standing on what they thought was just a fuel tank or something. Lo and behold, they're standing on a gigantic V-53 9-megaton warhead that had all of its stuff intact. Luckily, it didn't count down and go kaboom, right?
Right, yeah. So while Hazel and the women are cooking and helping the volunteers, you've got these 1,000 volunteers, and then you have local people who are, I want to say nosy. They just want to get up there and see what happened. And yeah, two of the men were actually standing on the bombs, not realizing, because the snow was so deep. The local people who were just, I'm going to say like sightseers, very quickly were rounded up by the military. The military sent guards out right away with, machine guns and got people off the, got people off the planes. And then they had a group of military there at the airplane, completely, what was left of the airplane. The airplane broke up into all sorts of parts. It dug a trench 75 feet long and 25 feet deep. It sheared off all of the tops of all of the trees. One of the guys who I interviewed said the most amazing thing to him when he got up there to see if he could help was there was all of this tin foil that was strung around all the tops of the trees, and that's called shaft. Chaff, yeah.
Chaff, right.
And
so that stuff is for, like, in case there's a missile coming up at a big jet fighter or a bomber, it usually diverts it away. But you're right. It looked like Christmas decorations out in the field.
It did, yeah. It was amazing. Unfortunately, on this first day, as the military is, going around, they're looking for any kind of anything that's fallen from the plane that would help, is when they finally found the section of the plane and they opened it and they found Major Tomley in the plane. He never ejected. It is very sad. He was killed upon impact. But then that meant they still had 4 crew members unaccounted for. So the rest of the book then goes through a day-by-day sequence of what was happening back in Grantsville with all the volunteers, what was happening with the people that were out in the blizzards, the guys who were snow plowing, trying to get the roads cleared, because the blizzard went on for another 3 days. So really hampering a lot of...
well, how coincidental, as we're talking about people being impacted here within, 24 hours or less, with a very major and powerful storm, which we defined before as a blizzard, with winds, once again, ladies and gentlemen, over 35 miles per hour, near zero visibility, and the definition meteorologically lasting at least 3 hours as we continue. Linda, we're coming up to the hard break at the bottom of the hour, as you know, here in radio and in television, and we're so excited to have you talking about this as we move into the Dr. Sky realm. In our Theater of the Mind, we're talking about the aviation topic. We're talking about the security of nuclear weapons. And we're also talking from the humanistic side, something I find more fascinating than anything. What could be more fascinating than that? A story, as you write so eloquently, bravery, luck, and people working together as they continue to sort out this great mystery. It's happened more than once, ladies and gentlemen. In hour number 2, we'll continue to talk about other iterations of this, in which that countdown clock might have come even closer in the state of North Carolina. We're with Linda Harris Sitting, her book, B-52 Down, The Night the Bombs Fell from the Sky, her website, Linda Sitting, that's SITTIG.com. BeBullish.com. We will be right back in the Theater of the Mind. As we say now, it's time, of course, with our helmsmen, Tony and Bill, who we thank for making sure the signal sounds as good as you would expect. Live radio, opening up our minds on interesting topics that you tell us you like. We will be right back as we take a short intermission.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Looking for financial insights you can trust?
How do you protect yourself as an investor? What's the strategy?
I think it's really simple. I think you just want to be diversified in your portfolio.
The Payne family brings real-world experience to every conversation.
Well, I think that's the problem right now is, right, a lot of people that are close to retirement, they're taking so much risks. And if we do get a big sell-off, it could derail their retirement.
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Rural Americans deserve access to the best our nation has to offer, especially when it comes to healthcare. Across every state and every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families' health. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.
The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Bulletin of Atomic Scientists once again moves the doomsday clock now to some 85 seconds to midnight. Not to alarm you, but a fact of life. Our very special guest, Linda Harris Sitting, the author of many books, but this one relating to aviation and what could have been if it did go wrong. The B-52 down the night the bombs fell from the sky. Thank you for joining us, and I wanted you to continue on about the human side of this, about how the people got involved, and also as we memorialize those on that aircraft that did not survive. Please continue.
All right, so the human side, if you remember, I had told Bucky Shriver that I write about women, so I felt it was really important to include the wives in this story because they're all at home, sound asleep at 5 a.m., the doorbell rings, and the base commander and the chaplain is standing in their doorstep, and you know it's not good when that happens. So
right.
I really wanted to write down about the women. They ranged in age from, Doris McCormick was the oldest. She was 42, and Carol Wooten was the youngest. She was 23, 2 toddlers and an 11-day-old infant.
Wow, wow.
Yeah, and staring into the possibility that her husband was not going to come back. So I wanted to make sure that I included them in the stories as well and not just a postscript. And then the other thing was, thank you. When I was interviewing all these people who had actually been there, I was amazed at the patriotic fervor that they still felt, that they had been involved in trying to help find survivors. And I'm going to tell you one story that's not in the book.
Wow.
One of the first group of people I interviewed Harold Nichols, who was an older gentleman, and he had been called out right in the very beginning. He was with the Army Reserves, and so he was called out right in the very beginning to help. And, this is like 2 o'clock in the morning, so he gets up, his wife gets up, he grabs a cup of coffee and some toast, and he goes out the door. Well, he doesn't take food with him, and he's helping and setting everything up, and it's about 13, 14 hours later when he realizes he hasn't eaten and he's starved, and he's standing next to a state trooper, and his stomach starts to growl, and the state trooper says, "When did you last eat?" And, Harold says, "I don't know, last night sometime." And the trooper says, "Well, look, I have a cheese sandwich I'm eating. I'll split it with you." And the two of them sit there and finish the cheese sandwich together. And then years later meet again and figure out who they were. But
that's amazing.
I get and so I'm interviewing him and his wife, And I said to her, Helen, what were you doing that night? And she said, oh, don't write about me. I'm just the wife. I wasn't really doing anything. And I said, yes, you did. I said, it affected you too. And she said, well, when Harold left, I stoked the coal furnace. I fed the baby. She said, and I started cooking to make sure there'd be food when he came home. So after we had gone through everything, I'd written the book. My publisher was getting ready to publish it, and I got an email from Helen. And she said, Dear Linda, Harold is in hospice. And she said, we're not sure how much longer he's going to make it. And he said to me that his one regret was that he wouldn't live to see the book published. And I said, oh, gosh. I said, I'll mail you the manuscript and you can read it to him. So I overnighted the manuscript to her.
Yes.
She read the entire book out loud to him, and then he passed 3 days later.
Wow.
So that made me feel really good that I could have, helped in some small way, let him read, and his part in the story.
Linda, that's beautiful. And let me ask you about this. I mean, the pilot of the B-52, Major Thomas W. McCormick, I'm reading about that he also had an opportunity in the 40s to fly a B-17 with the legendary aviator Charles Lindbergh, and that's an amazing story. And even more amazing, am I picking on or am I alluding to the right person on the crew, that what he said to his wife, that if anything has happened, I promise I'll call you. And then if that is the right individual there, because the first thing the man did when he came out of that crash alive, he made a collect call. Is this the right person that I'm talking about, Major Thomas McCormick?
Yes, that's another wonderful human interest part of the story. So I'm also going to share something else not in the book. So part of this was in the story. So Tom McCormick does land. It takes him 6 hours to go maybe less than a mile through the blizzard and the snow down. When you crash in an airplane, one of the survival tactics is to start going down, lower and lower and lower altitude to try and get to safety or to try and get to, human habitation.
Right.
So, 6 hours Tom walks through the blizzard. By this time he's got frostbite. He's exhausted. He doesn't think he can make it. And he finally gets down low enough that he sees what he thinks in the blizzard is an outline of a barn. In the meantime, it's the Warnick farm, and the young high schooler, I've forgotten his first name. I have to look it back up. Mr. Warnick's son,
yes,
says to his father, I think I see somebody out there in the snow. And, Mr. Warnick says, no, not in this blizzard. And the son said, there's somebody out there. So they suit up and they walk through, they trudge through the blizzard. They get through the field and they finally get to where Tom McCormick has pretty much almost, collapsed. And they get him back to the farmhouse. Excuse me.
No problem. That's interesting. You can take a break here, because what I'd like to do, Linda, I know where this cold and flu season is pretty intense for people. I myself sound a little hoarse, but the point is we continue on. But the interesting thing is, not to cut you short here, I just want to see if we can get some of the callers in here. It's 1-800-848-9222. Let's say good morning. You've been patient. Ronnie in West Maryland, relating to this particular story. Good morning. How are you? Thanks for joining us.
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well, sir.
I live about 10, maybe 15 miles from where that plane come down.
Yes.
And I don't remember it. I was born in 1967, but I remember pictures when they brought those bombs. They brought them down what we call Douglas Avenue, down into Lonaconee and out of the area. So, it could have been, had they gone, I would be here today. My parents wouldn't have been here,
Sure. It's amazing how the fate of history and how the things happened good in this particular case. But Linda, there's a gentleman testifying, even though before he was born, he recollects the story. Please continue.
Yeah. Well, it really was amazing how the entire community turned out. So Tom McCormick is now sort of collapsed on a fence. Robert Warnick and his son Daniel are helping him back to the farmhouse. And the first thing he says when he gets inside is, I need to call my wife. So he did. He called Collect to let her know that he was still alive. Now, the part of this whole story that touches me the most is I went up to Garrett County when the book was published, and I did a big book talk at a couple of bookstores and a history center, and then I went all the way up into Garrett County, and I was in Grantsville at their historical center. And as we pulled up, there was a line of people out the door, down the street, waiting to hear me talk and buy the book. And the amazing thing was when they came in, and I came in, I did a very short talk, and I sold out almost immediately of all the books I had bought, and so people were paying, and I was taking down addresses and promising to mail books to them. So all of a sudden, this one, and most of the men were much older, but then all of a sudden this one guy came up, and he was younger, and he took his hat off, and he said, I want to thank you for writing this book. And I said, oh, it was, my pleasure. I feel very emotionally attached to the story. And he said, I feel attached too. And I looked at him and I said, there's something familiar about you. I said, I don't think we've met before. Right. And he said, no, ma'am, we haven't. He said, but I'm Daniel Warnick. I was the young boy that told my father that there was a guy out there in the blizzard.
Wow. In your book. Boy, the boy had a great sense of observation, bringing awareness to his father, or else that member of the crew would never have been found. No. But I find it interesting here. I want to see if we can get as many callers in before the top of the hour. I appreciate your time. No, with this cold and flu season here, hopefully you have some water or something near you. I do. So you can continue with no hesitation. Let's say good morning to Max in Manhattan. Max, you're on with Linda talking about this amazing book. Good morning.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. Linda City. There's a book that I came across not too long ago. It was by, I forget if it was Linda, but the last name was City. And the writer was from Nebraska, and it had to do with culture in Peru and Lima and Quechua. I was wondering if this is you were the same writer.
No, I am not, but that's very interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if the Siddig name is, are there many Siddigs, or are we just talking about...
There are not. That's what's really kind of interesting. There were 4 boys who came in well, they weren't boys. They were young men, 4 brothers who came in 1848 from Trusen, Germany, landed in America, and all became coal miners in the Western Maryland area, and then their families eventually moved much further west. So it could be that the guy in Nebraska is related to us, because it is a very unusual last name.
Well, Max in Manhattan, it's interesting to have you on the show here, but let me say this. I think the overpowering thing here is, I can't repeat it enough, how fortunate we were at that time with these other experiences you'll hear in hour number 2, that these hydrogen bombs didn't go ahead and just initiate the countdown cycle.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, that's amazing. Max, are you with us? I just wanted to give you a last word. If you go ahead.
I am. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Sky. You have a very good show going. Keep it up.
I thank you so much, Linda. See how they like what we're talking about here. And again, ladies and gentlemen, if you're always interested, I always look and I search the universe, literally, for the best guest possible. But if you ever have somebody that you think you would feel is definitely worthy of being on the air, my email, DRSKY, that's DRSKY, Dr. Sky at WABCRadio.com. Can't guarantee we'll get all of them, but right now, we're so happy to have you, Linda, in discussing this interesting book. So we got it about 2 minutes before the break here. So some of the other books you write, you say it's more toward what? The female side of the equation? And I know that's kind of generic, as I said. Tell me more about some of the other things.
What I do is I write historical fiction. So I take a real historical event, like B-52, and I look to see in this historical event, I try and research like women that would have been involved in it, because not trying to be sexist or feminist here, but if you look at history, and I was a history major in college, almost all of history was always written about what the men did, and a lot of the women did amazing things and were just never, we never talked about it, or it was not written. So I do a blog every month. I've been doing it for 14 years. It's called StrongWomenInHistory.com, followed in 64 countries, and I search out stories of women that most people just don't know about and how they contributed to history. And so my books that I've written, the first one is Civil War. I wrote about the woman who came up with the idea that before the Civil War, all soldiers' uniforms were 100% wool. She came up with the idea to do a blended cotton and wool uniform that would be easier, easier to wear, last
No,
longer.
that's amazing, Linda. All these different women, and I would give one here, and the audience may not know this name. Maybe you do, and maybe you'll even write another book about her. Look up Vera Rubin, the astrophysicist that was shunned by many men because they never wanted her in the 1940s and 50s to get a PhD. Simply because she was a woman. What a shame. Yeah. And the Vera Rubin story might be one that who knows?
I just wrote her down.
There you go.
Right.
And with that, Linda, we will be right back. Still time, 1-800-848-9222. And ladies and gentlemen, we take that intermission as we call this Theater of the Mind, the Dr. Sky Experience. Time to go to the snack bar, or if you'd like to get your favorite beverage, we will be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Rural Americans deserve access to the best our nation has to offer, especially when it comes to healthcare. Across every state and every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families' health. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.
The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
I know not what weapons World War III will be fought with, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. A quote from Albert Einstein as we move on to 46 minutes after the hour, as we almost complete hour number 1 of the Dr. Sky Experience. Linda Harris-Sitting is our guest. Her book, B-52 Down, The Night the Bombs Fell from the Sky. Linda, this is fascinating if you're an aviation historian or interested in that, and just if you're interested in the human side. But let me give this shout out. I'm a veteran myself, but to all the women out there whose husbands and other loved ones went on to war, the sacrifice that the women made needs to be recognized, obviously, and also all the people in the town that helped to do everything they could to see that whole crash experience was, how do I say this? They worked very hard and worked together to bring about a positive ending to that, and also the military.
Yes. And it's amazing how many people up there still it is, how many people maybe not actually remember the event itself, but I had people coming up to me saying, my grandfather was the one who you wrote about, and, or my uncle, or, I was just a kid. I was a little kid. I was in kindergarten. I don't remember it, but it's amazing how many people, the stories that are passed down. In fact, one of the stories that Bucky Shriver told me was about his mother. His dad was working the cat-eye shift at midnight down at the Kelly Springfield factory. And so Bucky's mom was home with the 4 kids when all of a sudden, she woke up hearing the crash and the sky being, blood red, and then, worrying about where did the crash happen? Is her husband safe? She's there with 4 kids. The blizzard's raging. So it affected so many families.
Well, Linda, like an episode of The Twilight Zone here, and I'm reading this 24 years before your story, B-52 Down, a B-17, ladies and gentlemen, on November 21st, 1943, crashed in the western mountains of Maryland as the number 4 engine flamed out, ice on the wings, 5 crew members bailed out at 7,000 feet, landing near Ebensburg, Pennsylvania. The B-52 crashed, Linda, right near Savage Mountain, Maryland. That's amazing that there's kind of a correlation 24 years before. That is amazing.
It is. It truly is. And remember, those guys bailed out at 7,000 feet. The B-52 guys ejected at 30,000 feet. In fact, every time I fly now and the captain will say, sit back, ladies and gentlemen. You can take off your seatbelts. We're now cruising at 30,000 feet. I often look out of an airplane window and thinking, God, this is the height they were when the guys from Buzz 14 had to.
Well, for those aviation enthusiasts, take a look at the schematic. I know you showed this, or somebody shows this, and somebody showed it to me. I've sat in one of these planes, never in the air. But if you see air shows and they ever let you in the cockpit, there's that area down below, which is called a black hole. Yeah. And the problematic thing here, not to split hairs forensically, but it's almost incredible how the, upper ejection seats go up to the top of the plane, and there's also bottom ones. But when you're upside down and the other person's not in their seat, it's a very cramped situation. And the best depiction, I think you might agree, is Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, when they show James Earl Jones and our good friend Slim Pickens. Even though that's a deep black comedy, it shows you kind of the interior of one of those. They're not very roomy, to say the least, right?
No, they are not. And now imagine, too, once everything started happening, the plane's breaking apart. It's total darkness, all the electrical failure and everything, and the chaos that must have been, and the terror that the men had to be feeling. And when they ejected, they were up so high, they went through several thousand feet of free fall before the parachutes were designed to open. So the whole experience had to just be just terrifying. And the two survivors, I shouldn't give away this, but the two survivors, Tom McCormick and Mac Peden, for the rest of their lives suffered from guilt, remorse that they had survived and the other three men had not. And it affected them for the rest of their lives. Tom McCormick went through many, many bouts of severe depression to the end of his life because of it. And Mac Peden literally becomes an alcoholic towards the end of his life.
How sad.
Sad. Very, very sad.
And for many out there that are veterans, obviously, the clarion call is that hopefully our veterans can get the care that they really, really need, ladies and gentlemen. We all know that it's a really simple thing for somebody to say, this host. But PTSD is a very real thing. I know a lot of veteran friends of mine, and maybe everybody out there. I'm sure you have your favorites and those that you know. So, obviously, we need to do what we can to help support our veterans in every aspect of these horrible wars that we go through. But let's talk about the bombs for a second and the recovery. So, as we close out this hour, obviously, thank God, they never did detonate. And if they did, you and I probably wouldn't be talking right now, nor would a lot of people. The effective yield of those, if we were to just place it at the, ground zero location, and I've done some analysis of this a little deeper. There are these simulations that you can do with the effective power of these type of weapons, 9 megatons. That's pretty powerful. They were also put into the head end, the top end of the Titan missiles. And here in Arizona, we have the Titan Missile Museum. And if people haven't seen it, you go down in the caverns where they had the underground base, and you can still see a missile in the tube, but they took out the B-53, which is the 9 megaton warhead, but simply without going through too much detail. That would have eviscerated not only that whole area, but probably Washington, D.C.
Yes.
Maybe even areas along the, like Harrisburg and other down into Baltimore. I mean, you can't even imagine the destruction that something, and two of those, figure that. Yeah. So what happened, Linda? They obviously recovered them, but they didn't tell anybody. They kind of slipped out.
That's really kind of an interesting story because, they were recovered by the Air Force, but when I started interviewing people, everybody had a different story about what had happened to the bombs. Some of them said, they went out of here on a construction flatbed, and somebody else said, they paraded them through Lonaconing. It was like a parade, and I'm thinking nuclear bombs. But the old-timers, the older-timers who had been there for a long time said, there's no way they went out on a construction flatbed, paraded through the town. The Air Force took care of them as quickly as possible, and they were gone. When I spoke to one of the park rangers, they said they knew for sure they were gone by Friday, but what exact night it was done in the middle of the night when nobody would have been there, and they had to be trucked from the bomb site, the farm outside of Lonaconing, to the Cumberland Airport, and then they were taken away from there. And I read the entire report that the Air Force put out. It's a 93-page report, I guess I would say. But heavily redacted. So there's very little in it except the specifics about the bombs themselves, how much they weighed and stuff like that.
Well, let's tell the audience the final terminology here. Broken arrow is the terminology that's used. It's a flag word, I'm reading this, for nuclear weapon accidents defined as unexpected events involving nuclear weapons, warheads. And they go on to say the situations, accidental or unexplained nuclear explosions, God forbid, non-nuclear detonation or burning of a nuclear weapon, radioactive contamination, loss in transit of a nuclear asset, imagine that, with or without its carrying vehicle, jettisoning of a nuclear weapon or nuclear component, and a public hazard, actual or implied. Now, that's more of a legal term. But that's the military designation, right, Linda, that they talk about?
Yeah, it's called a broken arrow. And there were actually 32 of them that happened during the Cold War years. When the Cold War years were finally over, the broken arrows no longer existed because we weren't sending B-52s up into Russian airspace and with the Chrome Dome missions. But, yeah, there were several. And to this day, there was one that crashed right outside of Savannah, Georgia, right off the coast of Tybee Island, which is a very popular tourist area back here in the east.
Beautiful. Right.
And it's buried somewhere deep in the Waccamaw River, and it's still there.
That's amazing. And you'd think that other nations or some people in the dark of night would be trying to dig for the thing. And who knows? But thank God we're not giving anybody any ideas.
No.
But you're right. 32 of these broken arrows in hour number 2. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We appreciate Linda's time with us on her very interesting book, at least for the aviation world. And for those of you that want to salute, actual citizens coming together in a small town. And obviously this under a situation that is just horrific. The loss of life on that particular crew of Buzz 14. The 484, the bomb wing B-52 bomber. We're going to be talking about all those things. And then in hour 2, we're going to get into a discussion of how these particular thermonuclear weapons actually work, and not to give away any state secrets, much different from the fissionable bombs like the days of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah.
You get the last word. We got a couple of minutes. Always give our guest the last word, and that's the right thing to do, don't you think, Linda?
I do. So it moved me very emotionally writing the book, type of book to research. It really, my dad had been one of the first, his plane was one of the first planes that took off on D-Day, back in 1944. He was the bombardier. So as I was writing this book, of course, I thought about him and his entire military experience, and that thank God he came home or I wouldn't be here today. I do want to give a little plug for the book, that B-52 Down can be ordered in any regular bookstore, but it's also on Amazon. And if you wanted to buy it in quantities, then it's available in Ingram Spark. And it's still selling. It's still selling really well.
I appreciate you, Linda. Thank you. And your website, Linda Sittig, and that's SITTIG.com, LINDA, Sittig, SITTIG.com. Privilege and honor to have you here, and let's stay in touch. I mean, any look-sees into a future thing, a book, I should say, that you'd be looking to write? I mean,
I am. I just finished a World War II book about the women who built the Liberty ships in the 18 shipyards on the eastern seacoast that transported all the supplies over to Europe during World War II. 18,000 women did that, and yet no book has been written on them yet. So
that's amazing. People forget too soon. The Liberty ships, look at what they did for us. And looking at the losses that they had crossing the Atlantic with German submarines. They were like sitting ducks. It's amazing. Linda, thank you for your time. Good morning, and thank you for staying up. I hope your throat clears up, and you'll have a wonderful day. I appreciate your time.
I hope you guys don't get buried too much in snow. Well, you won't where you are, but everybody up there in New York City, I hope it's not as bad as what they're predicting.
Blessings to be prepared, ladies and gentlemen, for what's to come here, and hopefully it passes. And then again, as we always say positively, the sun will shine again and warm us up. The power of the sun. It's an amazing thing. Linda Sittig, thank you for your time. We appreciate you on the Dr. Sky Experience. We'll talk soon. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, in hour number 2, we're looking to communicate with Bill Yenny. Who's he? BillYenny.com, a very famous aviation author, talking about not only these other incidents that have happened with lost nuclear weapons. We'll talk a little bit more about the reality of what's happening with nuclear weapons around the world, and also get into a discussion of, how about you've heard of the F-47? What is that? President Trump wants to see that particular sixth-generation fighter. We'll talk about that with your questions and comments at 1-800-848-9222. We will be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
As we continue with hour number 2 of the Dr. Sky Experience, heard here on the Blowtorch radio station, Talk Radio 77, WABC, we continue with great content, as you tell us, from the realms of astronomy, space, aviation, weather, celebrity guests, and stories, rightfully, of American exceptionalism. We want to thank our guest, Linda Sitting, in previous hour 1, for giving us some insight into some of the things that happen. Bravery and courage for people who gathered around a small town in the mountains of western Maryland after a tragic B-52 implosion in midair and the release of 2 thermonuclear weapons. In hour number 2, we go to our go-to guy in the world of aviation. Bill Yenny is the author of more than 3 dozen nonfiction books, as well as a dozen novels. His work has been selected for Chief of Staff of the Air Force Reading List, and he is the recipient of the Air Force Association's Gil Rob Wilson Award for the most outstanding contribution in the fields of arts and letters, an author whose works have shaped how thousands of Americans understand and appreciate American air power. The Wall Street Journal says, and I quote, Bill Yenny writes with a cinematic vividness. And we solely agree here on the Dr. Sky Experience. Good evening to you on the West Coast. Bill, thank you for being with us tonight.
My pleasure.
Always a pleasure, my friend, to listen to you. Let's start off with some of the new books that you have, and I know you're also a fiction writer, too, so for people that are interested in hearing about the stories of the West, tell us a little bit more of those as you write about some novels.
Yeah, I've written a couple of Westerns, very different from the world of aviation, especially the world of high-tech AI aviation that we're probably going to be talking about later. It goes back to the 1870s, and which was around about the time my ancestors homesteaded in Montana Territory. Going back there, and it's not a homesteader, but a loner running from his past, and he's found that he's good with a gun, and he becomes a bounty hunter.
Well, those stories of the West, Bill, are always so fascinating. And here in the West, where I am in Phoenix, Arizona, lots of legacy stories that we can hopefully get you on in the future to share with us some of these great mysteries and stories of the Wild West.
Yeah,
no matter where you're listening.
I'd love to do that. I grew up in Montana, in the mountains of Montana, and you're talking about snow, and it reminds me of when I was growing up in the mountains near where I lived, within a 20-mile radius. There were mountains where we routinely got snow drifts that were 60 or 80 feet deep, sometimes 90 feet deep, and so that was what your listeners are about to experience there in the New York area. We had
absolutely
a whole lot
hunker
of
down, be safe, ladies and gentlemen, and obviously common sense. Stay as much as you can off the roads. Obviously, your website, Bill Yenny.
Leave your car. Yep.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bill. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, keep your cars parked tonight.
I would think so, and for the next few days. Your website, Bill Yenny, YENNE.com. A plethora of information, ladies and gentlemen, on the subjects and beyond what we're going to be talking about. In hour number 1, we had Linda Siddig talking about her book about B-52 down. But I wanted you to go into a little more detail for the audience here about these terminologies that the military uses. We were talking about broken arrows. I think I went through at least somewhat a little better explanation than maybe most people have. This is, of course, when a nuclear weapon accident, meaning a lost nuclear weapon. There's obviously a lot of other categories there. But what I found amazing, 32 broken arrow incidents from 1950 to 1980. That's a lot of nuclear weapons being thrown around and bounced around, and thank God none of them have gone off, right? I mean, that's obvious.
Yeah, well, it's they're designed not to go off. But what worries me the most is is radiation contamination from those bombs, not necessarily an explosion. Of course, having said that, the next thing you know, there's going to be one, but there hasn't been one in the 70 years that nuclear weapons have existed. There hasn't been an accidental explosion. But you're right, there were a lot of broken arrow incidents. Over half of them involved B-52s. Variety of causes, head-on collisions were one of the problems in broken arrow incidents. There was at least one incident where two B-52s collided. So you had two broken arrows at the same time.
Amazing. And
then a lot of turbulence, a lot of metal fatigue. Well, there's only a couple of metal fatigue issues. One particularly ominous incident was when a F-100 accidentally fired a Sidewinder missile and shot down a B-52.
Oh, good. Yeah.
That's something that actually happened. And,
that's pretty sad. All right, that's just
yeah. I was that certainly gets your attention. It was a kind of a scary incident that happened in 1961. And,
all questions that you may have, ladies and gentlemen, to our guest Bill Yenny, of course, 1-800-848-9222. Plenty of time to get in on the conversation. But Bill, if I may steer this aircraft in this direction, after we were talking about the 1964 Savage Mountain B-52 crash. With
I had the pleasure of listening to your first hour.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay, good. Yeah. So you're already prepared.
I tuned in and I listened to that amazing story. I had read some articles about that and knew a little bit about it, but that was certainly an amazing story. She certainly did a good job of researching and getting personal and getting down to the fine nuances of that whole story.
Yes. Let's shift gears and talk about this one, the 1961 Goldsboro B-52 crash. And if you don't mind me just taking the liberty, folks, of just reading the intro to this. The 1961 Goldsboro B-52 crash was an aviation accident that occurred near Goldsboro, North Carolina on January the 24th, 1961. A Boeing B-52 Stratofortress, carrying two 3.8 megaton Mark 39 nuclear bombs broke up in midair, dropping its nuclear payload in the process. 5 crewmen successfully ejected or bailed out of the aircraft and landed safely. Another ejected but did not survive the landing, and 2 of them were killed in the crash. Now, this is another one of those broken arrows. But, Bill, I know you've done the research on this one. This one, to me, and I don't like the word spooky, is probably one of the most all-time, oh, my God, we almost had the thing go off kind of situation.
Yeah.
This is what I'm reading here. But tell me about this whole thing, because one comes down in a parachute, the airplane's destroyed in midair, and then it crashes, I should say. And then one comes down, the big bomb, the Mark 39, 3.8 megatons, and the other one, literally, no parachute, impales itself into the ground. But there's more to the story about the countdown, what happens inside these devices. There's a whole lot of switches. Take us through some of that series, because it almost went to green.
Yeah, well, there were so many fail-safes in those bombs that, it's definitely an almost, and you really don't want to say, oh, that was no problem. But
exactly.
There really is a lot of fail-safe architecture built into those bombs, as there was 60 years ago.
Yes. Well, without boring the audience, Bill, of going through each line in here, I mean, I have all this material in front of me, but the point is, by the luck of, by the grace of God, this particular one that impaled itself into the earth, till to this day, the secondary core of that nuclear weapon has never been recovered. That's another strange story, don't you think?
That is, yes, you talk about spooky, and that's certainly one. What about the one that went down in January of 66 in Palomares, Spain. Went into the Mediterranean.
Exactly.
And there's still pieces of that are missing.
It's a very strange situation. 1-800-848-9222. We see the calls coming in. We'll get to you folks in just a moment and appreciate your patience. Let me describe in the simplest layman's term, and please add to this because I'm not a nuclear physicist and I'm not trying to pretend to be one, but I have studied this really deeply. If you look at this particular bomb and the class that we're talking about here, these thermonuclear weapons, the simple way to describe this of how you get a hydrogen bomb, people think it's filled with hydrogen, that you go to a place where we're talking about like the Graf Zeppelin or something, or the Hindenburg was filled with. No, this is different, not to be insulting to the audience. You have a uranium core, let's say, that is obviously, they call it oralloy. And what happens in there's a timing mechanism to keep this real simple because it's really complicated. In a regular fissionable type bomb like Hiroshima or Nagasaki, maybe up to 15 kilotons. The process is that sphere goes critical and then kaboom. But in the hydrogen bomb, there's this process called the Teller-Ullman design. And the biggest, most powerful nuclear, hydrogen bomb we ever detonated was the 15 megaton one called Castle Bravo. But what I'm describing here, and I want you to, add to this, after the first series in a hydrogen bomb goes off, it sends energy through tubes, and you describe this, I know it sounds ridiculous to people, and even to myself, like a plastic chamber in which the focused energy moves in toward the central core, giving the lithium deuteride, which is in the fusion part, an even bigger punch. That's just off the charts. So if you're looking at a regular atomic weapon, and nowadays these hydrogen bombs, people could look up the Teller-Ullman design if they want to get more info. Bill, what say you on this? Because I want to get to the callers, too.
Well, I say that you said you weren't a nuclear physicist, but you're talking like one.
Thank you for the compliment, but believe me, this knowledge that I've given pales by someone, and not to put myself down. Thank you for the nice compliment, but seriously, it's a much, much more complicated thing, and we have to thank people like, well, if you want to thank anybody, Edward Teller and the physicist Ullman, who came up with this incredible thing in which the Soviets actually stole some of this technology. This is an amazing story, too.
Yeah, well, that was the scary thing through all of the Cold War was that we knew what we had was pretty terrible, and we knew who was in charge of running these weapons, but we had no idea what the Soviets were doing, and except that they had our secrets, and they had their own secrets, and they had their bombs, and if we couldn't trust them in any other way, how could we trust them with nuclear weapons? So it was a frighteningly scary thing, and it still is, because you've got Mr. Putin running this arsenal, and we've seen what he's capable of in Ukraine. So I think it's you're coming at it from the nuclear physics point of view, and
sure,
I guess I'm kind of looking at it from the strategic point of view.
Absolutely, as a historian who writes about it. Absolutely.
So, Al, the people who are making the decisions to use these or not use them, under what circumstances will we use them? When you've got situation in Israel where, there's, I hate to use the overused phrase existential threat, but, if you're got a little tiny country like that and their existence is threatened, seriously threatened by somebody else with nuclear weapons, what's to stop them from going out with a bang?
And obviously, to talk about current events, Bill, right now, who knows? It could be hours, it could be days. The United States is building up so much air power and naval power toward Iran. It's only a matter, hopefully, doesn't happen, but it looks more likely that it probably will. Why would you send all that equipment over there? Well, if they're not going to come to the table and do a reasonable, I couldn't trust those people, and you couldn't either.
No,
I can't trust any of them over there with that.
Yeah, and certainly when you're dealing with a regime whose ad nauseum slogan is "Death to America, death to Israel."
It's horrible. Yeah.
So, what is Israel going to think? They're sitting right there, and, a hydrogen bomb would go a long way in the mountains of Maryland or North Carolina, but it would go all the way in any target in Israel. So, what's the strategic thinking in those chambers right now?
Who knows? Let's go to the callers, Bill. You're very popular here. Let's say good morning to Ed in Cleveland. He's been patient. Good morning. You're on with Bill Yenny. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
We're doing
Hope
good.
Everybody's
good to talk to you.
Thank you, sir. Please continue.
Okay. You guys were talking about nuclear bombs.
Yes, sir.
I had a top secret clearance in the military.
Okay.
As an air traffic controller. And those bombs don't get activated until they're elevated. They don't. Because I lived this terrible thing where our runways were tilted, or taxiways were tilted to help B-52s to get there faster if we needed them. But one day they called us at the tower and they said, "Oh, there's a nuclear bomb rolling down the runway." Oh no!
Literally, or are you being funny?
No, literally.
No, that's.
We saw the worst of the worst, and
oh my God.
They finally the colonel called and said, "No, it's not activated until it gets elevated." And
that makes sense. Right now, you made me feel better, Ed, when I sleep tonight, that at least that thing, when rolling, doesn't go off. But Bill, what do you say to Ed? I mean, this is interesting. He's got some experience firsthand of seeing a rolling nuclear weapon.
Well, yeah, it's you've got. Well, it's like I was saying earlier. These things are so many fail-safes that they're built into these weapons that the steps that are required to activate them are considerable. So that again, that will make you feel, or should make you feel, a little bit safer. Certainly with accidental explosions. I mean, look at, you've got, we were talking of the number 38 broken arrows. No bombs went off. And, that's over much more than half a century. And I guess I'm trying to look at the positive side of this.
Well, I like to hear that, Bill, and that's interesting. But to Ed in Cleveland, thank you for your story, an eyewitness account of a rolling nuclear weapon. But back in the days, I guess the story was for the children. What was it, gentlemen? Duck and cover. How crazy. Imagine that. We were told to tie it under the desk. I did that when I was a New Yorker, and I couldn't believe I did what they told us, but I don't know how much ducking that would do. But Ed in Cleveland.
I'm afraid that wouldn't have done you much good.
You just wouldn't have seen the flash, but there you go. Ed in Cleveland, thank you for your time.
You would have seen it because it was everywhere. It would have been everywhere in the room. So you would have been in the middle of a big ball of light.
I shouldn't laugh. I mean, it's a very serious subject. But ending off before we go to the hard break, Bill, I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. Apparently, the nuclear weapon that was released from the story we're talking about here, the Goldsboro, North Carolina incident, they have never recovered the secondary core, and they dug into the earth, maybe 100 feet or so, and boy, that thing was going pretty quick. So I guess I'm thinking out loud here, common sense, they never found the core. So I can't understand that. I mean, with all the technology today, you'd think you could dig down and get it. You have any other information on that? And we only have about a few minutes.
No, I don't. That's one of those things that I've heard about and sort of filed it away as we file away little scraps of paper in the shelves and nooks and crannies. That I'm going to go back to that and look into it, and never did and haven't yet. And yeah, it's something to look at. Something to look into.
It's amazing stuff here. If we haven't gotten to you, ladies and gentlemen, like Paul in New Jersey, as soon as we return from the hard break in just a few minutes, and for the rest of us out there in cyberspace, and, of course, here on the Big Blowtorch, Talk Radio 77 WABC, our contact number, the door is open. Our theater doors are open in the Theater of the Mind, 1-800-848-9222. We got about 3 minutes. What's your most popular book that you've written in the aviation world? I got to hear this because there's a lot of aviation fans out there.
Oh gosh, I think the books that I've written about fighter aces have been probably been the most popular. I did a dual biography of the two highest scoring American aces of World War II, Dick Bong and Tommy McGuire. It's called Aces High. That was pretty popular. I did a book about the highest scoring female air ace of all time. She was Russian, and that book is The White Rose of Stalingrad.
Amazing.
And those were quite popular. And I did a book on the B-52, which continues to be popular. And of course, I did the Area 51 book that we've talked about before.
Now that's really intriguing because not to shift subjects, we wouldn't have enough time to cover it at all, but just to mention it in its entirety, we wouldn't. But look at what's going on right now. Isn't that incredible? We're hearing the former President Barack Obama saying, yeah, they're there, but I haven't seen one. And now the President Donald John Trump, and from what we're reading, who knows, may give us some insight into this. At least we're hoping from the UFO community, Bill, to hear that what most common sense people realize, we're probably not alone in the universe from the astronomical numbers of planetary objects that are like the Earth. That's going to be an amazing story for sure to hear.
Yeah, it is. And it's one of those things that it will, when it happens, when we do find this out, if we find it out in your lifetime or mine, I will make a prediction that it will come, that announcement or that revelation will come in a form that we did not expect.
Wow. That's interesting, Bill, whatever that might be. So in other words, not the most obvious way of revelation. It will come in a different way. It will come in a different way, and the revelation itself will not be what we expected. It's like like going to the movies and having a surprise ending. Wow! I never saw that coming. Bill Yenny, you're very popular here. BillYenny.com. And also, Bill, I'll give a plug to my brother's website. Who's my brother? Joe Cates. If you're looking at aviation, military aviation, photography, and articles, go to photorecon.net. A house popular. I know you've given it your thumbs up, too. And ladies and gentlemen, this is a fascinating time in our history. Who knows what will happen as military forces of the United States are kind of zooming in on that area in the Middle East. And of course, who knows? Hopefully cooler heads prevail, but I guess you don't put all those assets in one place if you're not going to do something. So let's see what happens here. But let's pray that no nuclear device is ever detonated. And the goal is obviously to stop the radical people in the military over there in Iran that want to see the nuclear weapon on their side of the table. For Paul in New Jersey and others, 1-800-848-9222. We will be right back on the Dr. Sky Experience.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
TaxAct knows every small business owner has different tax filing needs. With TaxAct, you can file yourself with the help of an expert, or TaxAct can do it all for you. You're the boss, the head honcho, the top banana. And TaxAct is like your loyal, trusty tax aide, ready to pounce on any tax needs you might have. TaxAct is dying to pounce on some small business tax needs. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.
The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The unleashed power of the atom has changed everything save our modes of thinking, and we thus drift toward unparalleled catastrophe. Another quote from the late Albert Einstein. 30 minutes after the hour, we first want to thank the amazing General Chuck Yeager, who many have had the opportunity, I'm sure you have, Bill, of meeting the legendary first man to break the sound barrier. Welcome back, Bill. And I think it's really cool to go to the callers right now. Let's say good morning to Paul in New Jersey. You've been patient. Good morning, and your comments.
Dr. Sky, how you doing?
Good.
I wanted to know, did you know that President Carter was part of Broken Arrow?
I did not know that, sir. Tell us more.
I heard, I think it was on Mysteries of the Monument or Mysteries of the Museum, that he broke down a nuclear reactor inside a Navy ship.
Oh, okay, on the submarines, yes, okay. I didn't know all the details, but he was a submariner, right? You bet.
Yeah.
And now one of the most sophisticated submarines in the fleet is in his honor, and they say that submarine outclasses so many others. Bill, any idea on submarines like that Paul's asking about or talking about?
Well, yes, I know that Jimmy Carter was a submariner, and he was a close friend of Admiral Rickover, who was the father of the nuclear submarine fleet, and I know that he had studied nuclear physics, and he understood the reactors more than the average submariner did, and I think that was his specialty, as I recall.
You know, Paul, that's interesting. If you're still with us, that's an interesting story, because what they're using there, and again, I've never been on board a nuclear submarine. We were invited to do a media tour once, but we weren't going to get out of the harbor. You could just go down and never get into, of course, the reactor room. But apparently, it's a very small, I think it's Westinghouse that builds these, or one company like that, I think they're referred to as W5s or W9s. But that must have been an amazing journey for before he was president, to be part of that nuclear propulsion. Paul, that's pretty interesting. So thank you for telling us about it. That's interesting stuff.
Yeah, I think the naval nuclear reactors are a model for the kinds of nuclear reactors that could be developed for civilian use. Small, compact. There have been no major problems that we know about with them, and we have nuclear aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines, and it's a compact and, as far as we know, reliable means of tapping the atom for propulsion.
Yes, and if you look at the science fiction side, I never missed an episode of Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, and if many people are there who know that, it's still on MeTV. And after this radio broadcast, I'll be watching another episode. Wasn't that an amazing television show talking about the Sea View that had a glass front to it, and it had that little tiny yellow little submersible that took off when it went underwater. It took off in the air. That was an amazing bit of science fiction, but who knows? Maybe
that kind of technology. Wow.
That's amazing.
Well, there was that guy, Jules Verne, who invented submarines 200 years ago.
You got it. Bill, I want to shift gears with you because I think this is an area of your, real expertise, and I appreciate you. We see the F-22, very sophisticated. We've gone to so many air shows. My brother Joe and I stood in front of them when they first were put out in display, and a lot of times the military guard standing there was telling us, don't take pictures at the front end of the thing. And I was going, okay, we must be looking at some sensors. But from the F-22, Bill, Let's talk about the next generation of military fighters. We're talking about an addition to the F-15. I think it's called the EX, which is even a more sophisticated version. But beyond that, what can you tell this audience about the F-47?
The F-47, the F-47 is a sixth generation fighter, and whereas the 22 and the 35 are fifth generation fighters. But there are a lot of sixth-generation fighters in development around the world. We were talking off-air a couple hours ago about the Chinese Chengdu J-36 and the Shenyang J-50. Those have proceeded to, and I think beyond flight test. They're moving toward operational status. The F-47 has yet to fly. And the Russians are working on those.
I see a few of those, Bill, that the Russians are working on. But tell the audience what designates and creates a sixth-generation fighter. What's the difference? Tell the audience. This is interesting.
Okay. So in the fifth generation, you had it was by that time it was well established that stealth characteristics are a must. It was something that was in the fourth generation jet fighters, it was unheard of, and we had to have these dedicated stealth airplanes like the F-117 to achieve that. With the F-22 and the F-35, they have to be stealthy. Okay. The other thing is this characteristic of super cruise. It's where you can cruise at supersonic speeds, and you can do so efficiently. Excuse me. So this is the fifth generation. So moving on to the sixth generation, you obviously have to have those characteristics. But you're moving into whole new areas of, just looking at some buzzwords, this data-informed decision-making, data fusion, cyber warfare. That was something that was just unheard of in the fourth-generation fighters.
Sure.
And that's, that's something they're looking at. And I hate to use the word because it's all over, but artificial intelligence.
I know you were going to say that because I'm reading this, not right now, and many people are, that the integration of AI into these may not necessitate a active human pilot anymore. Now we're talking really high-tech stuff, even beyond that of the Star Wars stuff, right?
Yeah, and this integration between human and systems, human beings and the systems of the aircraft, that's something that's got to be beyond the imagination of a lot of people designing airplanes, not very long ago. And this sort of thing. And another thing that I've read that is of interest in the sixth generation is the ability of these aircraft to achieve suborbital flight.
Ah, yes. Now there you go. That's interesting. We're
just going to nip into outer space for a half a turn around the world.
Not that I'm a big fan of Nazi Germany of the past, but they developed something you probably know even better.
Oh, yeah.
This Sanger type of almost a space plane that they were going to use if they developed an atomic weapon. Its sole purpose, not to scare people in New York, was it's going to suborbital and drop something on us. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it was. The idea was that this was before any form of space flight, and the idea was it was going to take off from Germany, go into outer space and then pass over New York City, deliver a weapon, and then continue a single orbit around the world and land back in Germany.
Wow, that's amazing.
And that's
time.
We're talking 1944, 1945. This is Eugen Sanger, who was the guy who invented this thing. It was never built, and they never even really built a prototype.
Well, thank God they lost. Right.
Yeah. Well, there's their aviation technology was way beyond us in a lot of ways. So those are some of the things that are being talked about in the sixth generation fighters. I think a lot of AI will be included. A lot of this whole idea of the human system interface, something that where the systems are smart enough that they function almost like a co-pilot in operating the airplane and the weapon systems. Because these are warplanes, so it's not just the aerodynamic characteristics of the airplane and its flight characteristics. It's the weapons that it's going to deliver, and it'll make the smart bombs of the 20th century look like clubs and sticks.
It's amazing. Imagine what Wilbur and Orville Wright would think if they could come back today and see the advanced technology in just a short amount of time. That would be amazing. Our contact number, 1-800-848-9222 to speak with Bill Yenny and ask your questions. And if you are waiting on the line, like Tony and Clifton, we will get to you as we approach and return from this break coming up in just a couple of minutes, the last break of the 2-hour show. You know, Bill, it's amazing. How long have you been doing this in the writing world for these type of books? I mean, I'm sure it's going on for quite a while.
Yeah, it's going on for 4 decades.
Well, congratulations on all these books. And again, ladies and gentlemen, go to Bill Yenny, YENNE.com. And again, another plug for my own brother, who specializes in aviation photography, military aviation. You've seen it, and you've given us a nice thumbs up on it. Photorecon.net. Contact information from various military organizations, aviation, not only here in the United States, from Canada, from Germany, Europe, the whole European area of aviation, military-wise, helicopters, aircraft, and all good stuff like that. Just amazing stuff to learn out there. And, I turned down the F-16 backseat ride. I know people laugh at me and say, well, you should have done it. But I realized what he had to do to go through that, all the physiology of training and suiting up. And he admitted to me, he probably doesn't want me to say this, but even sitting in that back seat, unless you hook that oxygen up in the heat of Arizona's May or June, it can get a little bit squirrely sitting in the back seat. But they did a combat mission simulated over the Barry Goldwater range. And you know what I said to him? Better you than me, right, Bill? Chief.
Well, I did one of those on the B-52 once.
Oh my God! Well, how'd that feel?
Speaking of B-52s.
Yeah, well, we got to take a break, Bill. We'll be right back here on the Dr. Sky Experience. Your calls, ladies and gentlemen, 1-800-848-9222. And we got Tony and Clifton up next when we return. We'll be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. A quote from J. Robert Oppenheimer a long time ago, back when the first Trinity nuclear explosion happened back on July 16th, 1945. At 46 minutes after the hour, Bill Yenny is our guest, and proud to call him a friend of the show here as we move to the top of hour number 2. Let's say good morning to Tony in Clifton. Tony, you've been patient. Haven't heard from you in a while, and good morning to you.
Hi, Dr. Sky. Hi, Bill Yenny. I have a different question for Bill. I want to go back a bit further in history to my favorite person, who was George Armstrong Custer. And I just wanted your take on my feelings about, his sort of underrating as to what he did and the significance of it, because there are many people who received the Medal of Honor at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. So my question to you is, looking at his history coming out of the Civil War and being sort of on automatic pilot, and what his family went through, which you talk about, what is the most significant thing that you feel people need to understand about him? Because he really represented our country at a time that we needed him, and he had received honors in the Civil War. What can you tell us about him that people would really need to understand?
Tony.
But there's
really,
a lot of
that.
misconceptions about him, Bill.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, this is fascinating.
I was going to say that you probably have read my book about the other Custers, the brothers of George Armstrong Custer. At the Battle of the Little Bighorn, there was not one, not two, but three Custer brothers died there, and so did their only sister's husband. So it was a real family affair. I've written that book, and I've been out to the battlefield probably a dozen times from between 1962 and 2024. And so, I followed his career. I will clarify that he did not earn the Medal of Honor. His brother Tom, however, earned 2 Medals of Honor. He was one of only a tiny handful of people who earned 2. His significance in the Civil War was quite a lot. He outmaneuvered Jeb Stuart at Gettysburg, and he checkmated Robert E. Lee at Appomattox Station. You've heard of Appomattox Courthouse, but Lee was sitting in that town waiting for his supply train, and it never arrived because Custer outflanked the Confederates and captured Appomattox Station and the supply train, and that basically checkmated Robert E. Lee. So that's his significance in that particular battle.
Well, see, Tony, we get the right guy, and I appreciate you. Quick follow-up, because we got to move forward. We got a few more callers before the top. Go ahead, please, if you're there.
Well, Dr. Sky, thank you. Thank you, Bill, and thank you for the work you do, because the history is amazing. There's so much oral history that is not correct, and there's so much written history that is incorrect. So you're a gem. God bless you, and thank you for all you do.
Well, thank you, Tony, for being part of the Dr. Sky experience. We appreciate you. Let's say good morning to Tony in Arizona. Tony, you're on with Bill Yenny. How you doing this morning?
Hey, thank you, Dr. Sky, and thank you, guests, for all his history, information, stuff like that. I wanted to backtrack just a little bit about the nuclear energy issues there pertaining to former President Carter when he was there. I mean, nuclear energy is something else. I mean, especially now that we have our Palo Verde nuclear energy here and everything else involved, especially the fleets that are regrouping over there, over in the next to Iran. But going back to former President Carter during his naval career, he was never really deployed on any nuclear submarine. He was in training to go into the Seawolf. President Carter at the time, he only was actually deployed on diesel-powered submarines.
Interesting. Clarification by Tony in Arizona. Bill, it's interesting. Story of submarines and Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, he was an acolyte of Rickover, and he was active in the nuclear propulsion world. But I think that's correct that he did not deploy on a nuclear submarine.
Tony in Arizona, thank you for giving us an update here, and we appreciate you as always and all of the people who are part of the Dr. Sky experience. A shout out to owner and operator John Katsimatidis, and of course from the executive staff, Chad Lopez, for giving me the opportunity of a lifetime to sit behind this particular microphone. Your questions and comments to me at DRSKY, Dr. Sky at WABCRadio.com. And any possible future guests, we do have lots of them that we're looking toward to get, not only in the world of astronomy, but aviation, as we have our special go-to guy, space, and of course, all these subjects, weather, and celebrity guests that you'll be hearing from now on, and lots of them, ladies and gentlemen. We're looking at Billy Mumi from Lost in Space, a good friend. We've had him a number of times in other shows, and he's, said as soon as schedule permits, he'd like to share with you his days from Twilight Zone, Lost in Space, and I'm sure you'll have tons of questions with him. We wrap it up here in about 7 or 8 minutes, but you have the floor and talk about more of the things that you would like to bring to our attention in the aviation world right now.
Well, I think that you brought up an important topic with the sixth generation fighters, and I think that that will be an interesting area to watch as these things develop, as the F-47 comes along. Those are important things, and I think that everything you've said about the Iranian situation is it's scary, but it demands that we watch it. It's off into the world of the unknown with
yes.
what may or may not happen over there. So those are a couple of things to be.
It's a very complicated situation. Very complicated. It's got a lot of moving parts, and we don't know how strong or how weak. I mean, maybe some of the government agencies really do know the strengths and weaknesses. I hope they do, of what they're up against here, because that could start a whole regional war that maybe has no end in sight. Because
I am sure they know more than we know they know.
Mm-hmm.
And they certainly know more than we know.
And I've just noticed on various friends of mine that report into me, Russia seems to have a number of its military aircraft now stationed in Iran on the ground, including their version of what we now have as the big 747, alleged called the Doomsday plane, the big command and control airplane that we have. But apparently the Russian version has shown up over there. So, wow, everybody's assembling their hardware. But again, the Russians are building up a presence in Iran, obviously, to support those guys over there. So who knows?
Well, the Russians are doing a lot of shopping for drones in Iran, and they have been for the last 2 years. So a lot of those drones that you see in pictures and film from Ukraine, those are Iranian-built drones.
Well, Bill, as we mentioned before in hour number 1, as you know, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, the Doomsday Clock, is now set at 85 seconds to midnight. God help us. It was set way into the, higher numbers. Back in 1991, it was set at 17 minutes to midnight. And the clock in 1947, I'm reading this, was set at exactly 7 minutes to midnight. So hopefully it doesn't wind down to 10 seconds before midnight. But again, ladies and gentlemen, you see when the president is traveling, you see this rather large bag that's always there with a military aid. And Bill, I know you know about this. This is the, special suitcase that in the event of nuclear war called the football. But we also want to mention that the Russians, I was going to say Soviet Union, but that's not accurate. The Russians actually carry a little suitcase that looks like a primitive old computer of the early Apple days when they had the big the big cathode ray tubes. Their nuclear suitcase is called the Cheget. So let's hope any of those ever have to be used, because what do you have? You only have maybe 20 minutes, if less, to respond to something if it's a real authentication that weapons are headed toward us, and God help us, whoever has to make that decision, right?
That goes without saying.
Absolutely. Bill, I appreciate you, and I want to thank you. Bill Yenny, that's YENNE.com. always our go-to guy. I mean, you can check out his books. There's so many of them, ladies and gentlemen, that it would take, maybe a few days for us to go through it. But, Bill, one day, let's do that. I mean, when we had Tony and Clifton call up talking about the period in American history with Custer and such, let's do those books that you have that talk a little bit more about some fictional things and also some factual things about the West and the American history that goes along with that. We do appreciate your time, Bill. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure, my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, we always give out a short sky report here for those of you that say, what happened to our information about the heavens? Just know, as we move to the end of February, this is interesting in the heavens. Don't forget, on the morning of March the 3rd, there will be a total lunar eclipse, mostly visible from the central and western U.S., but still, beginnings of that eclipse will take place for our listeners in the eastern time zone. Right now, the moon moves on to its first quarter phase. As we continue to move on, that happens on the 24th. The moon's closest on the 24th. And still, your two primary planets that are in the heavens for sky watchers, still Jupiter high up into the east, you can't miss it, now well over 430 million miles from your eye. Saturn hugging the horizon in the west just after sunset, and a plethora of winter constellations like Orion the Hunter, and so many wonderful things. Take a look below Orion. The brilliant star that you see there is the brightest star in the heavens, other than the sun, the star Sirius. When you see it, it's 8.6 light years away. What were you doing 8.6 years ago? Because the light you see now left there 8.6 years ago. The beat goes on, ladies and gentlemen. Always information here on the Dr. Sky Experience. And my email, once again, is drsky@wabcradio.com. No question is too difficult, and we always speak the truth. So if you have questions and comments or potential guests that you think would be worthy of being heard on this most powerful blowtorch radio station, you know how to get in touch with me. Once again, thanks to our helmsman navigating the signal, Tony and Bill doing an excellent job. And ladies and gentlemen, we want to wish you the best for hunkering down during this blizzard. Be safe, of course, that's an understatement. Clear skies and the brightness of the sun, we assure you, will return, and happier days are on the horizon. We want to be optimistic. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Dr. Sky Experience. You can hear the Dr. Sky Experience Saturday mornings, midnight to 2 a.m. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.